Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Vasco Gomes. I am the global CTO for cybersecurity products at Atos. And Atos is a global digital services leader generating 12 billion euros, so approximately $13.5 billion of revenue yearly, with employing 120,000 employees over 73 countries. And we've announced last year a global alliance with Google around artificial intelligence, machine learning, hybrid cloud, and digital workplace. And in these initiatives, we embed our own cybersecurity product solutions and cybersecurity products from third parties that we leverage to secure these services to customers. We've opened 3 AI labs around the world in Paris, London, and Dallas in the US, where we welcome customers to come with their AI use cases. So we build with Google AI engineers and Atos AI engineers proof of concepts around AI use cases for customers. And we base our strategy, our innovations, on 6 services. And I promise it's the last slide about Atos itself, where we help customers increase their application agility, which is our digital transformation business unit that does that, which does also enable SAP on cloud for our customers. We drive more IoT for our customers in terms of connecting the cloud and IoT worlds together with the on-prem services of the customer. Digital workplace is the 4th point about collaboration on real time on Office 365, GSuite, and other cloud services. As I said, artificial intelligence services for our customers, leveraging Google technologies. And the one point where I will focus today is hybrid cloud for our customers in a private on-prem and public cloud environment. And I will specifically focus on the security and start with a few concepts that I believe should be core and should be the basis of understanding between our customers and ourselves and the cloud service providers. So basically I see sometimes, there are now some customers or some environments that are coming back from the public cloud to on-prem for part of their services because they understood or they took wrongly this concept of shared responsibility, which is now, I think a lot of people talk about that, so it's getting more and more in the heads of everyone, but I wanted to speak about that again today to make sure that it's clear. When we move our services to have infrastructure as a services cloud service provider, we still are responsible for the way we configure our virtual network, or workloads, the firewalling, the platform, the applications, identity and access management, and ultimately, even in a SaaS mode, we are still responsible for our data. And the Gartner predicts that through 2023, more than 99% of the security failures in a public cloud environment will be due to a misconfiguration from the customer, setting up wrongly access controls on buckets or on a virtual machine, wrongly configuring a firewall or a web application firewall, etc. So that's where it's important to focus our security technologies and security service correctly when we move to the cloud. And when I say cloud here, I encompass IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS services, and making sure that we know where is our most sensitive data and where it's being moved. So we need to identify it and start, if we are not if we didn't do it yet, start to know where is the most sensitive data and the low. Even if we don't go to a full data classification model, at least identify the most sensitive data. In order to apply what I believe is the core domain security domains that we to protect the data, which is managing the identities and accesses of people and objects that are accessing your data. When I say objects, I speak about IoT, but I speak also about any kind of machine, any kind of server, application, API that is accessing your data or requesting access to your data, and apply encryption to the most sensitive data. there is no point, and I will show it later, there is no point in applying strong encryption to all your data. So you should really focus on the most sensitive ones. Control, once you have done that, you need also to control your virtual network, and it will be more and more difficult as we see that the boundaries are expanding, and that when we think about the fact that our employee base and our business units use not only our IaaS services, but also SaaS services like Salesforce, Workday, Dropbox, GSuite, then the new perimeter of the enterprise is driven by the data that is moving. So I don't speak anymore about, I speak more and more about the perimeter of the data. Where is the data moving? And that's a big challenge to understand. And once you've set up your security controls, never assume that you are 100% secure, that nothing will happen badly. So you still have to really focus on how I can detect and in a timely manner and respond appropriately to events. Always key, and understand also which configurations I may have missed or may have overseen. And also then, in order to make sure that you know where is your data moving, focus on controlling the use of SaaS services and IaaS services by your employee base or by your business units. So, and this is mostly helpful and done by solutions like CASB, Cloud Access Security Brokers. And the Gartner predicts that by 2022, 60% of large enterprises will use a CASB, while today I think it's approximately 20%. Which, understanding the use of Shadow IT and SaaS by your employees will also allow you to better target your security awareness and identify what new services are being adopted by your employees to either secure these services or propose to your employees secure alternatives. So once we have said that, what we mostly forgotten is that security is not only, as an IDC study has shown, is not only the number one concern for a public cloud migration program, it's also, paradoxically, the number 3 driver for a move to the cloud. And which I think cloud technologies for me I see them as an opportunity to do security better. So we need to shift a lot of our mindset and to adopt these new technologies to be able to tackle some concerns or some obstacles that we are not able to tackle on-prem. And when I think about cloud, public cloud, I don't think only about virtual machines that we set up on a GCP environment, but also about the possibility to automate, to use infrastructure as a code for deploying automatically our workloads through a CI/CD pipeline, or immutable infrastructure. And this is a way for us to automate the delivery of security settings, security agents. So embedding our security agents and settings into the templates of our IT when they deploy new machines is a way to make sure that our controls are deployed consistently. It helps also in terms of security audits, because if you are sure on how your templates are configured, you know how your production is deployed. Once we say that, once we use these strategies and we move to a more auto-scalable infrastructure and horizontal scalability, where on demand, according to the load of customers, we provision new machines. We will move to a world where the traditional legacy static firewalls splitting our infrastructure into 3 or 4 segments will not be enough anymore. So controlling there will still be critical and important to control what we call the north-south communication from the internet to your environment, from your on-prem to your cloud environment, also from more secured zones versus intranets. But you will have then to ensure also that you monitor what is happening between your machines, your workloads, which can be virtual machines or containers with micro-segmentation, so enforcing security controls, firewalling, intrusion prevention, so packet inspection, entering and outgoing of every machine, and by this leveraging the tags and labels on your machines that are something that has been already adopted by the DevOps entities to make sure that when they deploy new workloads, they know what these workloads are doing. So this is an opportunity for us security professionals to also use that in order to automate better the firewalling and the delivery of security agents. One thing that we do is pushing all our partners, all our security vendors, to make sure that they adopt a unified security posture, what I will explain later, which is one central console to orchestrate their solutions across on-prem platforms and public cloud platforms. And with this central console of the security vendors being open to API calls, meaning that these API calls need to be secure. But taking this assumption, we will be able better to make all these solutions, all these vendors working together. Tackling one of the main issues that I see in security today, which is the speed of closing the doors when an attack occurs, or the speed of taking a response to an event, whatever it is, a security event of coming from a log, or a misconfiguration that we have detected. So doing that and enforcing that, we are able to really automate and orchestrate our security. It's something that I will dig further just later. And also test your application. So use application security testing tools to help your DevOps understand which vulnerabilities they have in their code. So the business code, the business applications that they are developing, and the open source libraries they are using. And the application security testing vendors are adopting DevOps, are connecting, are opening their tools to CI/CD tools, Jenkins, GitHub, Jira, to be able to automatically scan new code and scan code as it's edited. And for most critical vulnerabilities, create a bug fix ticket in Jira, so your developers see that as a new bug fix for them. And once we have all that, the next step is, in my point of view, make sure know that your production, when you have a third-party solution or a piece of code that is vulnerable and you need to update it, you don't need to patch anymore the production. What you need to do is update your templates, like I mentioned earlier. Update your templates, test them, and then your production environment will be renewed with these new templates. So you need to ensure that you kill your existing workloads in a structured manner and start new ones with the new template. So we don't have to negotiate anymore, which is what was one of the painful parts, negotiating maintenance windows with the business, which they always say that they are 24/7. They cannot afford for a downtime. So now there is no more downtime with this strategy. You update your template, you kill the machines, and start new ones. And when you have done that, you can push the logic forward and saying that you don't need your machines, your workloads, as they are multiplying horizontally, to be up, one single one to be up forever. You can set to it an expiration time, let's say 8 hours, and say that all your workloads will expire after 8 hours, and your auto-scalability engine will monitor, in GCP it's managed instance groups, will monitor the workload. If this workload was necessary, it will spin up a new one, starting for your templates. So you know that your environment will be renewed after, your complete environment will be renewed after 8 hours. So of course, this is applicable only to applications that are compatible, that are cloud-native applications that are compatible with this approach. But as we move forward, that's what I see, moving from monolithic applications to these cloud-native applications. So when you do that, you remove the persistence of your environment and make it harder for the attackers to discover your environment. They will have to, when they start plugging an agent or a Trojan on your environment, it will be removed after 8 hours. So of course, this is only valid if you make sure that they cannot tamper with your templates. And your templates become your most valuable assets along with your data. So once I did that, I said that this introduction was really to focus for me on now on the presentation on data, on your data and the code. So the templates and the data that drives your business and your applications. And once I said that the data is the most important part, to enforce data security-centric features, I will focus on 2 features that I will present now, Identity and Access Management and Encryption. So first, very quickly, I believe this is something that is pretty clear for everyone, but I will take it again, which is how does the identity provider, the IDP, works with SAML. One user makes a request to the cloud environment, to Google Cloud or to GSuite, to GCP or to GSuite, is presented with a GSuite login page, login field. He enters his login Vasco.Gomes at Atos.net, and is redirected to the identity provider configured for the Atos.net domain, which is a third-party provider where we have federated our identities with. So once this is passed to the identity provider, which makes a request to the user, presents a new page to the user, and the user enters his password or enters any other authentication method, could be a strong two-factor authentication. And once this is done, the identity provider validates the identity of the user and his context, access context, and delivers a token both to the user and a secret to the cloud service provider. And the user is then entitled to present this token to the cloud service provider, which can then allow him access to his environment. So once we have said that, and we are Atos as a global managed security service company delivering services over the cloud to 200, more than 200 customers, large enterprises, we are facing with a difficulty, which is how do we manage all these complexities of every customer having his own identity provider and accessing to a multiple set of solutions. Could be ServiceNow, software as a service solutions like ServiceNow, TIBCO, Office 365. Could be also an API gateway like APG. So this is the complexity to manage, complexity to set up. You have to set up the environment everywhere. And also some providers are not multiple IDP compatible, like TIBCO Spotfire. So what we've done is transformed our solutions to work as an IDP router, identity provider router. So the customer can still rely on his own identity provider. There are a lot of them on the market. And we don't touch anything on this. We just forward the request. This is called the feature is called where are you from feature in SAML. So we do when the Office 365 G Suite provides us with the authentication. We set up our Atos CVDN Web Access Manager as IDP for the service provider, and in the customer environment, we set up Atos CVDN WAM as an IDP, as a cloud service provider. So we insert ourselves into the chain, and we enable by that to be simplified in terms of management, in terms of monitoring, and also for TIBCO Spotfire, for example, it sees only one IDP, which is our IDP. And once we have done that, we can plug our identity governance and administration solution. So it's a workflow management, recertification solution, which will be which will serve for the customer information security office team as a single location where to define all their profiles. So we are bringing profiles, default profiles, and they can define for every role and profile who from their teams are entitled to this profile. Could be Linux administrator, SAP administrator, could be folder organizer, an assistant, executive assistant for collaborative services. And this is defined in our central location, and we are adapting our profile templates to be multi-cloud available. So once a customer wants to move workloads from one cloud provider to another, or do a migration from a competitor to GCP, it doesn't change the templates that he uses in our solution. We just unprovision automatically the access rights and the groups and users from the previous environment, and we do the API calls to Google Cloud Identity, which is the IAM model of Google, to newly provision the users, the groups, and the access rights in Google, in GCP. So it eases the migration from a cloud service provider to GCP. We work with we provide this single point of administration. Also, for customers, for the CISO, this provides a single location where they can see every of their access rights, and I will come back on every of their cloud service providers. When you do an audit, you don't have this time to go to every of your cloud service providers. Should it be GCP, GSuite, Dropbox, Salesforce, Workday? You simply go to the Atos Evidian interface, and you see who is entitled to which role over all your cloud service providers, and you have the traceability over their activities, which also gives you a single panic button, where you can, when an employee leaves the company, you just go to the console, you remove his access rights, or if you have integrated your IDP with ours, which is the objective, we detect with our IDP that the user has disappeared from your directory, and we automatically, the IDP part of our solution communicates with the identity governance administration to unprovision the customer. So for example, in GCP, when you're in GSuite and you provision an account on GSuite and a user authenticates, his session is active for 2 weeks by default. So when a user is removed or is gone, leaves the company, even if you remove it from your directory, the IDP session, when he authenticates, lasts for 14 days. So if when you remove his account, his sessions, if he has opened the session from his own unmanaged device or his own laptop at home, this session can be still open, can still valid for some days until 14 days. One way of enforcing and removing his sessions would be to go to the GCP console. You have access to the GCP console or the G Suite console, and you do a password reset, which kills all these sessions. But you have to do this touch. And what we are doing here in the solution is automating doing that automatically. As the IDP detects that the user has been removed from the directory, we communicate with the Identity and Access Management or Identity Governance and Administration solution, and we do the API call to G Suite to reset the password and then kill all the sessions. So, and the possibilities and the use cases are endless when you say that. The strength is to have coupled Web Access Management, IDP, and Identity Governance and Administration. We provide this single point of administration. We avoid when a user or a customer spins up a new cloud service provider, he doesn't have to reconfigure all his IDPs. We just do it from the Cloud IAM solution. And by doing that, we avoid also the complexity in a cloud migration of adapting all your access rights from one cloud provider to another. It's the identity and access management model of GCP is very different from its competitors. So it could be a key blocker for moving from a competitor to your workloads from a competitor to GCP, because you have to not only deal with the complexity of moving your workloads, but also with the complexity of adapting your IAM. So, and with this strategy, you are completely free from this issue. When I say that, I also mentioned earlier that managing your identities and access to your data is key. And in some cases, you can also, for your most sensitive data, want to encrypt them. And in GCP, by default, all your data are encrypted. So GCP does default encryption. But this default encryption that you see on the left of the picture is done with their default key management server, where you have no control, no access. You cannot revoke the encryption keys. You cannot spin up different encryption keys for different environments. But for that, Google has a service called Customer Managed Encryption Keys, CMEK, where it's basically exactly the same service. So it's the same key management server from Google, but this time you have an interface and you have access to the Google KMS, key management server, and you can affect different keys to different business units or different business applications. You can revoke keys, you can rotate keys. So when you have security doubt, you have a doubt about a security leakage, a data leakage, you can go to the key management server and revoke the keys. So you have more control, but still, for some customers, they don't want to put all the eggs in the same basket. So they don't want to, for their most sensitive data, they would want to have more control on the keys, on the way the keys are generated, created, and the ways the keys are stored. So for that, there is another option in Google, which is called, so we go further to the right, which is called Google Customer Supplied Encryption Keys. And it's an API of Atos, of Google, communicating with your key management server that you can host on-prem or on a private cloud, and which enables you to use your own solution to generate for your own key management server to create keys and store them. And when a Google Cloud Service needs a key, you have to provide it through CSEK, so it can decrypt the workload or the data. So this is, when I spoke earlier about the need to classify and to understand your data, you could not use all these solutions from that Google gives to you if you don't know where your most sensitive data is. Because there is no point in encrypting with customer supplied encryption key all your data, because as we know, the more you go to the control, the more control you have on your keys, the less compatibility you have with Google GCP services. So the default encryption, of course, is compatible with all GCP products. The customer managed encryption keys, so where the version where you have access to the key management server of Google, is only compatible with GCP application layer encryption on GCP products. So Google Cloud Storage, the buckets, Google Compute Engine, the virtual machines, BigQuery, and Dataproc. And as we speak, Google is enhancing their compatibility, but it's still not all the products. And when you go to bring your own key strategy, CSEK, Customer Supplied Encryption Key, it's only compatible with Google Cloud Storage and Google Compute Engine. So if it's a balance, it's a bargain between the trust and the agility. The more you go to the control, the more trust you have on the control of your data and the encryption keys, the less compatibility you have with Google services. But you might, for your most sensitive data, for the most critical data, you might not need to to use all the Google services, but only very specific ones. So that's one thing that we help you to do, is to make sure that you can set up the best approach between these three layers according to your to the sensitivity of the data. And once I've done that, I've said that. So one thing that I've not mentioned is the encryption tool used. In all these cases, and I spoke about the default encryption and the customer-supplied encryption keys, where you use your key management server and your optionally. So there was a line on the top that is hardware security module, which is optional. You can, for greater trust and greater entropy and greater randomization of the keys generated, you could generate them hardware. When you generate a key software, you use the random function of the operating system, which is less reliable in terms of strength of the key than hardware-based. But it's optional. And all that is always using cloud provider encryption tools. So in the case where you bring your own key, you use customer-supplied encryption key solution from Google, which is still a Google solution. So they still need you to bring your key at the moment of the decryption of the data. So they don't have access to all your encryption keys at all times, but at the moment the user, entitled users, authorized user need to access the data, the key needs to be provided to the cloud provider, so it decrypts the data and provides it to the unencrypted, clear to the user. So the first step is how can we have more control on the encryption tool in the encryption tool itself and replace and not use CSCK or CMEK or the default encryption of Google, but rather use your own key management server and your own encryption solution, and not provide the key to CSCK. So our solution, which is called Atos Data Protect, Atos Trustway Data Protect, is a global key management server embedded in an hardware security module that you can host on-prem or in a private cloud in Atos. We can deliver it as a service also, where the keys are generated here and managed, stored in this KMS. And we provide connectors and integration to encrypt file systems on Linux and Windows, etc. We do database encryption, Oracle DB2, MSQL, virtual machine encryption, application encryption, and tokenization, which is only replacing data with a token and keeping an index of these tokens. And we also have connectors for MongoDB, Hadoop, HBase, and multiple other services. So deploying such services on GCP and using this service, you can afford to provide the keys to a provider like GCP, like Google. And have a single pane of glass, a single control, a single console to control all your encryption on-prem, on the IaaS or PaaS services, in SaaS services, and through CASB. So integrate, we have connectors with the main CASB providers, Netscope, McAfee, Envision, so ex-SkyEye, Blue Code, that is now acquired by Symantec, and with directly encrypting data in Office 365, SAP, Salesforce, GSuite, etc. We do it also, it is more specific to Google with our private, what you see in the right is our private cloud, the digital private cloud, which we deliver to customers with G Suite and GCP. So what does that allow is for large enterprises that have deployed encryption solutions, that have encryption strategies for their most sensitive data on databases, on virtual machines, on file systems. What we bring is a single pane of glass, a single console, central console, where you have a full visibility on the encryption policies that have been set up. So don't have discrepancy over the encryption algorithm, encryption keys that are used in Oracle database or in your Linux file systems. You have one single console. You can see all the policies when you want to. When I don't know when an example triple death is considered insecure, you can remove it from all your solutions from one single location. And you have also traceability on every time anyone has asked and obtained access to a decryption key. So this enables a better control, better compliance, easier audits, and with this central management console. And one thing that I always put forward is that when your security controls are failed, so hackers have found a way through your firewall rules, have used a 0-day undetected by your IPS, intrusion prevention sensor signatures, or web application firewall signatures. When these have been breached, the final protection is have you encrypted your data or not? So, as a summary, I've focused on IAM and encryption because I wanted to focus on the data. But these strategies of having a unified central console to manage your security feature or security solution over on-prem and public cloud, whatever the solution, whatever the target, should be applied, in my point of view, to all security domains. And I like, for example, there is one of the biggest security partners of Google on GCP is Palo Alto Networks. For traditional next-gen firewalls, they have this panorama console that is a single console, central console, able to control their on-prem firewalls, so physical Palo Alto firewalls, and as well as the Palo Alto VM series, which are the virtual appliances that you can deploy on GCP. And with this central panorama console, you have a visibility on all your network firewall rules. Whatever the virtual network, the subnet is a subnet on GCP or is a subnet on your on-prem. And for all security domains, we are pushing our partners or the security vendors to go to the same strategy. Whatever it's a player on data loss prevention, on firewall, like I said, on encryption, every security domain. So to enhance one thing that is very important, it's central visibility for your control, central visibility for where your data is moving, and deploying your controls consistently, have a real-time monitoring and central monitoring of your events from a central location. This is what we are building on top of just IAM and encryption, is for delivering all security services on a public cloud environment, which is the top part of the slide, and across on-prem. All that driven centrally by a security orchestration and automation engine, a policy engine, which is delivered from our security operations center, able to orchestrate and automate the solutions, the security solutions, wherever they are public cloud or on-prem. So, as I said, when I focus on the data layer. I focus today on how I can better use Identity and Access Management and encryption to protect my data. And everything I said was focused on public cloud, but it's true for on-prem. And we should not forget that, and that was what I show in the previous slide, that we have also to protect according to our model. If we are in a IaaS, infrastructure as a service delivery mode, we have to protect also our applications, containers, VMs, operating system, and the virtual network. So what we do by this is enabling our customers to have a better ability to control their data, be compliant with regulations. It's one way of. It is one thing to have deployed the controls or the processes that allows you to be compliant with regulations. It is another thing to be able to demonstrate it in case a security breach happens. And you will have to demonstrate it. So if you take back the example of encryption, and if you have your Oracle administrators that have done correctly their job, that have encrypted the most sensitive data, encrypted the database or the table that stores your most sensitive data, but using an Oracle tool, you have the same thing for your Linux administrators that have done this for their file system. For SAP, you have done it. So you have all these teams that have done their job correctly, but in a silo, and you don't have a central visibility on which encryption algorithms, which keys, linked keys they are using. So you will have a hard time to go to every of these teams, ask them reports, look at the configuration to demonstrate to the regulator or to any entity that is requesting you to prove that you are compliant and that you have set up this correctly, meaning disabled the encryption algorithms that are no more considered secure, for example. So this central, I'm repeating it, and it looks obvious, but this central console, single pane of glass for all your security features is key. And one field that I see developing is for IaaS, focusing on infrastructure as a service, is the cloud security posture management solutions like Redlock, Dome9. So Evident.io and Redlock have been acquired by Palo Alto. Dome9 has been acquired by Checkpoint. You have DV Cloud that is present. DV Cloud is present here as a big stand in Google Next this week. Turbot and others, and the Cloud Passage. These cloud service providers, this cloud security posture management are delivering from a single console through API calls to your environment. Some are agent-based, some are API are agentless and based on APIs, and they have built a set of security policies, or they call it either controls or policies, but it's rules and best practices that they have built, and they test your environment to check if you are compliant with that. The most obvious examples are: do you have a bucket open in read or read write to the world? Do you have a virtual machine with a firewall rule allowing all accesses, 0.0.0/0 any access? So have you this? And they do these API calls across all your, if you are multi-cloud, all your cloud environments, and they give you alerts for this. And this is a central, for me, these cloud security posture management solutions will also open to third party and will be able to work as a central console to control your all your other security controls.